Welcome to the Leadership Labs with DeepRec.ai, a podcast where we delve into the fascinating world of deep tech entrepreneurship, company founders, and venture capitalists. I'm your host, Anthony Kelly, and I'm thrilled to have you join us in this exciting journey. In each episode, we explore the minds behind groundbreaking technologies, the visionaries who dare to push the boundaries of innovation, and the investors who fuel the growth of tomorrow's game changers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Leadership Labs podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Kelly, and today's guest is Rasmus Rothe, who is founder of Merantix AI Campus, and Merantix Founder Studio. I think we first had a podcast 6 years ago, Rasmus. I think you were telling me
it's a long time ago.
Yeah. You were telling me about the plans for the venture studio. I think this was back when every idea and every business was even in incubation stage, right? So it's that long.
Yeah, it was in the early days. I guess we were just like 5 people or 10 people or so. I don't even remember how small we were, but I think this was really the beginning of Merantix. So a lot has changed since.
Been an incredible journey. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen the rapid rise. It's been nothing short of exceptional to be looking from the outside. But look, with that, obviously, you would face a lot of leadership challenges, growth challenges, and that's what I really want to, get into the crux with you today, particularly around deep tech. It's a tough space to navigate. But before that, I want to try and understand you a little bit better. It's nobody really knows that they want to go down the road of entrepreneurship. You've become a very business savvy guy with a computer science background, and that's not always the way, right? Some people stay tech. You've managed to sort of move your career to that side of business, as well as being very technical. But I want to find out, what drove you down that road. But yeah, so I mean, like, starting it all off, how has your education, how has your background led you to being founder of Merantix? What set you up for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think I still probably don't have the perfect answer to this. I think I've been always intrigued by building smart systems. So I just realized the other day I trained my first neural network 20 years ago when I was 13. So kind of even during like middle and high school times already wrote a lot of software, worked on a lot of side projects, built like little robots that could move around, wrote my own little software programs. And so I guess was always, intrigued by building software that's somehow intelligent and can do stuff better or as good as humans, but also second thing, kick off some individual. Sorry, it's Anthony. Hello, you're gone. Sorry, you were gone. Shall we do it again? Let's do it again. Hello, you were dropping. Yeah, let's start again at the beginning because it dropped. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you fine. There's some background like white noise. Yes. Yeah. No, I can hear you. Yes, but there's some white noise in the background. It's not that bad, but no, I don't know how bad it's gonna be when you're. Yeah, now it's better. Yeah. Yeah. So you keep your question and then I just record my question again. Okay. Should I start or? I guess we're still. Yeah, it's still recording, but it seems to just record on my side. It just shows the recording.
Okay,
Okay.
we're back. I'm recording. Yeah, do you want to take it
Okay.
away there, Rasmus?
Yeah, I can. So I start with the question. I start with the answer again. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think I got in the whole space, I guess, when I was 13, so around 20 years ago, when I trained my first neural network. So yeah, I think during middle school, high school, I experimented a lot with software, with building intelligent systems. I found it quite interesting that you could write software that is somewhat better than a human at a certain task. So I trained some neural networks for like robots to move around, to play soccer. And I think at that point it was more like experimenting, but I always liked the idea of kind of pushing my own projects and kind of not having others to tell me what to do, but rather, set up a project from scratch, build something from nothing, and turn that into something cool. And obviously back then it was more playing around with things. But I think that went through my, I guess, like academic side. Then when I was studying computer science, did a PhD in deep learning, and there realized, okay, you can build really powerful things with neural networks, and basically then said, okay, look, like there's so many applications in the world that could be targeted with AI. Why not build a company, an investment company like Merantix that actually helps founders build successful AI companies and transforms what's happening in research into real world applications. And so fast forward, that's what we're doing in Merantix. And I think it's been always that drive of bridging this gap. So I mean, right now, and even more with the new language models, like the AI started to become so powerful that pretty much every or most applications, things we do as humans, AI can do better, quicker, faster, um, and so I think that's really fascinating me, and I kind of want to drive this adoption forward.
Nice, nice. I mean, there was a lot of good points that you've picked up in there, and I think like for me, one of them is that you started writing your own neural networks at the age of 13. That's obviously something quite special. There's no doubt about it. Where did that come from? Was software in the family, or was it just a personal interest?
No, I think actually, yeah, I think my 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 parents both work in the medical sector, are not very entrepreneurial at all. I think so. I think it's not like entrepreneurship or software engineering was something that was like common at home. I think one of the main drivers was, I guess, I was a bit bored at school. I did a lot of sports besides school, but I also still had a lot of free time. And then actually in middle school, I was in some kind of like special nerd class, so to say, and they kind of forced us to do some science projects. And in the beginning, obviously, nobody liked it. It was like, oh, this is all like extra work. But I think then I
Yeah,
started actually enjoying doing it and found that much more interesting than what happened at school. And so ultimately, I guess during high school, I even got like 1 day off a week to work on my science projects instead of going to school. So I think that was really cool. So I just did that, and then it was also cool. I could also travel a lot. I went to a lot of science competitions. So I was in Brazil twice, in China, and the US. So I mean, it was a cool combination of working on these cool projects, but at the same time, having a couple of weeks during the school time where I could go to these cool places and meet a lot of interesting people. And actually, that way, I also learned English. My English is, I mean, I still have obviously a big German accent, but like back then, it was really terrible. And so this also helped me to kind of connect more internationally, get better English, and that also led to the decision then to move to the UK to do my bachelor's.
yeah. Quite quite a unique sort of background even in there again, right? You said sporty and you were very smart in a nerd club in science fairs, right? Again, another good one that you don't often see a lot of, right? Um, that obviously takes you on a different journey. You can start to be, I guess I hate to say it, but the stereotype of a computer scientist is hoods up, doesn't talk, programs all day, right? So you kind of got away from that. Do you think that sort of helped you on the way to pick up those business skills in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, like I think people put people in a lot of boxes, and so I think there is always the certain stereotype of like the business person as well as the technical person. I think in reality, these lines are much more fluid, and I think ultimately, there's also a lot of business people that are very nerdy. There are a lot of like tech people that are maybe don't appear as nerdy as you would think. So I try to not judge people based on this, even though I think maybe it's by like Hollywood or like the movie industry of what like kind of the, the computer nerd needs to look like. But ultimately, I think also the space has changed a lot. I guess like in the 90s or 2000s, it was still this nerdy niche. I think now, I think computer science classes at some of the US colleges is one of the most popular classes. Like everybody takes this, everybody understands that they need to learn like basic computer science like any other, like English or any other language. So I think it became much more mainstream, and as such, I think also starts to become much less of a niche nerdy topic. And I think I think a lot of the interesting part is when you kind of cross these kind of different, like maybe subcircles. So I always try to hang out, super technical people that are far more technical than me, far better, but also spend time with people in the business space and other domains. Because I think a lot of the value creation, that's also what we think with Merantix, is kind of connecting these different domains together. Because usually, yeah, you need maybe somebody super technical, but you need maybe also somebody in manufacturing or biotech that has a deep domain expertise there. You need somebody who's good at selling because you need to, sell to customers, investors, talent. And so I think it's cool to bring all these different worlds together in teams, but also me personally, I really like kind of spending time in these different parts. And so as such, also, if I look at my calendar today, I have some meetings that are pretty technical and we discuss very much details, and some are like very like high level or businessy. And I like that combination actually a lot. I think that's
Nice.
where I also draw a lot of energy from.
Good, yeah, good. No, I mean, look, it's diversity of thought is a lot of things, and I do feel you're right, completely different now. I wish I got into computer programming. It wasn't popular when I was a kid. Definitely not in the social circles where I grew up, at least anyway, right? So it's completely different. Um, but you mentioned meeting a lot of different people. It gets you quite excited. Going from technical conversations to business conversations, probably to sales conversations. Let's say that's 6 years ago when Merantix had the vision and the dream to be a company builder, to do amazing things that hadn't been done 6 years ago. Um, what's that journey been like? Building businesses. Let's stop with just building businesses, and then I want to talk about the experiences and sort of the learnings out of it from there.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's I always like to look back, and usually I do that actually at the Christmas party. So we have our annual Christmas party, and that's our like, because it's always kind of around the same time of the year, and it has happened every year. So um, it's a good way to reflect, and I think it's always interesting to see how much progress has happened in the last like 12 months, and also how much things happened, like some things that happened much better and much greater than everybody would expect, that some things that happened completely like unexpected, and then also some things where we thought they were really easy, but we realized, okay, they took much longer, they didn't work out at all. And so I think, looking in that sense, looking back, I think if I wouldn't have known 6 years ago how hard everything goes and how much, like deer choose year two, and like even though it at the end looks all like nice and fancy, I would have probably said, look, like this is completely crazy. Um, but I think that's also kind of, I guess, what keeps me excited, like knowing that what's going to happen in the next 12 months from this Christmas party onwards. Um, yeah, is something will happen as expected, but there will be a lot of crazy stuff in a good and a bad way happens, and I think that adrenaline is kind of what keeps me
Yeah,
going, keeps me excited. So yeah, it's been like a crazy journey, and I think obviously things have grown a lot, but um, yeah, there's still a lot of things we need to get better at. There's still a lot of things we could be faster at, and that motivates me every day.
nice. And can I ask? So again, I remember when we spoke about it early stages, talked a lot about like incubation stages, which is like ideation, incubation, then producing and building a company. Um, I don't know this because I don't think I was smart enough to ask this question 6 years ago, right? When you're now building your companies, do you do it differently? Because I heard you already talk about how you might have someone in manufacturing, or you might have someone in sales. Is that the approach that you've always gone with, or is that something that I guess you've learned where maybe you've had purely tech founders?
Yeah, I think directionally we've always thought in the same direction, but I think we can articulate it better now. I think firstly, I think we really look for like driven founders that want to achieve something great. And I think that sounds very trivial, but the truth is it's so hard to build a company even in tech that you need somebody who has like infinite energy to kind of push through, even though there will be 100 reasons on the way to like stop and like give up. And so people usually have that drive because they're really passionate about a certain domain or really passionate about a certain problem to solve, and they've often even shown that before joining us as the founder, that they can make something impossible happen. So I think and that kind of drive, I think, ultimately also motivates like people to work for them, as well as investors to join, as well as customers to give them a leap of faith. So I think sensing that energy, but at the same time being kind of humble and knowing that there's a lot of unknowns and that there's a lot of things one needs to be coachable at. I think that combination is, from a character trait, like super important, because it kind of solves a lot of problems on the way. It's also like, if you're solving it because you deeply care about a problem and you're so high energy and you really want to get it done, you're also super open to have people help you, because you ultimately don't care about the ego. You care about the problem being solved, and if people can help you for that, that's great. And that energy is not always like, people might think this energy is like, it needs to be someone that talks a lot and is really loud, but sometimes these people are also like actually quite calm and like quite reserved on the surface, but then obviously below them there's like this kind of energy. And so I think that's something that is firstly super important for us, and it's not easy to sense, but when you spend a bit of time with the people, you can see if they have that drive. And I think the second thing we look at is like the world is competitive, more stuff is available open source, so it's much easier today to build a company than like 20 years ago, even in the tech. And so as such, you need to have somehow an edge, like also on the domain you're working in. Like, so I think we've been more skeptical that when you want to build a biotech or cyber company or manufacturing or some complex MLOps stuff, that if you don't have some background in that space and some unique insights, it will be hard to compete. Both to make sure you build the right things, but also to be too credible towards founders and as investors, co-founders, employees, and customers. And so we look for this edge. Now, this edge could be that you worked in the domain for like a bigger company. It could be that you did your academic background in that space. It could be that you just read a lot about that topic in your free time, and that's why you're really deep. Like, I think we're less like strict about where that background comes from, but I think it needs to be the background. So that's also, I guess, when I talk to founders in a first call, it's those two things I check. Do they have like some energy and passion about like a certain topic, and I can really feel they want to go all in about this. And I also see that when they talk about the space, there is some like substance to it and some like unique insight, some interesting perspective. And I think sometimes you have one of the two. So sometimes people know about a space, but then you feel like they're not really passionate. It's just because they happen to be in a job, but it's not like they would go the extra mile to solve all the problems in the industry. And sometimes the other way around, people are excited about like climate and education and healthcare and all these like hype topics and impact topics that are obviously super important. But then when you ask them, like what's, what kind of company would you build? What do you think is an interesting go-to-market or interesting approach? Then they're like, yeah, I don't know. And then it's also like, okay, then it's probably awesome to drive it. So I think that's how we think about founders. I think directionally we've looked at it the same way like 6 years ago, but I think I couldn't have articulated it this like precisely at that point.
Yeah. I guess I have a question for you, and I've just kind of spinning it off what you just said about having that something special. I want to ask because I've seen it happen with some great companies and some good founders. How do you know if you're not going to be too early with your tech? And what I mean by that, there's companies out there doing volumetric data, virtual fit and virtual try on, right? There was a period where I had Vadim from 3D Look, who built that company before virtual try on even existed. It was arguably silly, right? But it worked. But we're now in this phase where deep tech is possible to do a lot of things. There's a lot of ideas, even in green tech, right? But some of them just won't catch on. Do you ever look to evaluate? Yeah, great idea, but 2 years too early.
Yeah, I think timing is incredibly important. I think it depends what kind of company it is. I think if it's a very sciencey bet and you might be the first one who has done it, I think if you think it's possible now and others haven't done it, I think now is a good time. If it's kind of about the commercial traction in like the market and seeing if people actually would buy it. I think we run a lot of experiments with potential design partners, trying to really commit them to become customers even before we build the company, to really see, is this a real problem? Is somebody willing to pay for it? Um, and and there usually I make it quite simple. Like if people are willing to pay some money up front, commit to some subscription, even if they haven't seen like a full product, then it's a real problem. There is a market, and then sometimes it's not there yet. So I think that's how we try to evaluate it, but it's still hard. I would still argue like getting timing perfectly ready and right is not that easy. There's also probably also not like being a month early or later, but you need to be like directionally right, like in the right
Yeah.
like 1, 2, 3 years. And then the other part is also like think about competition, right? Like if you are in a space where 20 other teams are doing exactly the same, then it's really about like timing in a sense, like who's 6 months earlier, who's considered like the leader. Because also if you see how venture capital works these days, it's very like tries to like double down on like kind of the winning company, and the second and third company might not get any money even though they're nearly as good. So I think one thing we've also tried to go after domains that are huge markets, but maybe because they need special domain expertise or very interdisciplinary teams, is not something where you have hundreds of teams trying to tackle that. So for example, we started a company in the fertility space, in the IVF space. So it's a huge market, it's growing like crazy. Now you need to have some domain expertise to build a company there. Or we started a company in the manufacturing industrial space. It's very deeply integrated with factories and manual assembly, Delta. Again, it's something you need people who know the domain, who've been to like hundreds of shop floors. Yes, there is competition, but it's not something where everybody who has trained some neural networks can like start a company right away. So I think that way, if you're in these kind of a bit more complex domains, I think there's also less other companies, and as such there's also somehow less competition, and then maybe also less kind of timing sensitivity, assuming that the market, obviously, like the customers want to buy the product and the tech works. But you don't have this like, I think when the timing is affected by like your competition, how quickly they move,
Yeah.
it can become quite random if you succeed or don't succeed.
I did like I've had a lot of people come on talk about product market fit to see if they can soundboard out their ideas. You've gone a step further there. Normal, you said you have customers pre-committing before you build a solution. Or even a company, right? That's it's a great way to sound it out. Um, so
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that's a trick in our venture studio, basically, that we say, look, like ultimately founders want to always start building, but I always try to hold them back in our look, like there's no, yes, we can give you money today, yes, you can build for the next 12 months, but the reality is you will run out of money, you will not have product market fit, and then you will need to raise and bridge, and your life will be horrible in a year. So yes, it's easier now to just build and like not worry about this, but let's rather do it the other way around. So that's why we really try to spend a lot of time getting these pre-commitments, and it feels very like slow and painful and like lots of iteration, and you're like, hey, I just want to start building and shipping. But I think once you get these pre-committed like agreements with the design partners, you are in a great position to then develop the product very close to them, which is also great for them, right? Because they are the first customers, they can influence the product roadmap, they get a commercially attractive deal. But at the same time, you as a founder know you're developing something. There is somebody who will pay some real money for this, and so as such, you're not tapping too much in the dark, which is hard when you're working in the enterprise space where feedback cycles are long, sales cycles are long, and your run rate is very short. So you don't have like 5 years to figure that out. You have like
yeah.
18 months at most. So if sales sizes are 6 to 12 months, like you can do 1 or 2 iterations, and then you run out of money. And if you then don't have the traction, especially in current funding environments, your company will be dead or needs to be bridged, and things will get pretty ugly.
Well, I think that sort of lead is a very good lead into where I was going to ask next about building companies for scale. You gave what I feel sounds like somewhat element of a secret sauce, right? To what makes the venture studio so successful. But again, speaking of the last 6 years since we've met, what has been your learnings or people who have been through the venture studio on scale?
Like learnings about their character traits, or what kind of learnings?
Learning's about building companies to scale, right? Instead of like everyone wants to build to scale. Some people
Yeah.
build to scale, some people build to exit. So I guess I want to ask about building to scale. I mean, I would say I might be wrong, but I look at about 50% of your companies in my mind, the Merantix businesses are at about 25, 30 people within a 24-month period. So to me, obviously, you're gearing up, or it's scale, right? And then it really gives you the opportunity to give the next leg up, and as you said, to be that number one player in the market and capture it. So
Yeah.
that's like the way I see it. Is your strategy is you just don't build companies to exist, you just build them to scale and to take good
Yeah.
market ownership. So
Yeah.
what is, not to say the strategy behind it because you can't tell us everything, right? But what has been the findings? What has been the learnings over the last 6 years?
Yeah. I mean, like, you need to be in a big market. You need to have, like good customers initially so you can grow with them. And that's kind of back to this product market fit. I think a lot of companies spend like years, many years to find like real product market fit. So I think the more you can accelerate that, the quicker you can scale. But I think that the key ingredient is again the team, right? Like if you have ambitious founders that want to do anything to kind of make this company success, they will just work like 100% harder. They will like really work really hard to bring the best people on board. It will also motivate the whole team to be like, pumped and work hard and like push the envelope. So I think if the founders don't have that mindset and that attitude, it will be very hard to have that in the company. So I think the learning has been like even more, it's all the founders, because ultimately also we as investor, even though we are like very active investor in a venture studio, like we're not building the company. We can't
Yeah.
like give insights on like day-to-day things. We're also not as much in the details. We're not the experts. So the reality is by the time the company we invest, it's all with the founders, and it's ultimately their profile that determines if they're going to win or not win. And it's even more them than the market, because if they're good and motivated, they will maybe pivot, right? And they will realize that early. So I think like putting even more emphasis on having these founders and being right with them, I think is the most important. And so that's why, I mean, we've been also, last year we probably had like 1,000 people to try to work with us. We talked to a lot of founders. There's a lot of like inbound happening. We're reaching out to people all the time. And it's not a numbers game. Like we're working only with very few founders every year, and it's about finding the right ones that have that ambition and also kind of that insight.
I mean, what's where's the next step? I mean, for like in terms of growth or engagement from Merantix. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've been to the campus. I'm pretty sure it's nearly full. If I was to take a guess, um, I was there when it was a building site as well, so I've seen that happen. I've met a lot of your founders, a lot of great, super smart people. But you have such an audience that wants to be part of what you're doing. Is there a way to open it up to more by any stretch, or is it a
Yeah, I mean,
case you
there's
just have to be super focused on who you let in the door?
no, I think for the founders we work with, obviously, like we can only work with very few. So I think we need to be like hyper selective. Now, I very much believe in the ecosystem and the power of that, both for our companies, but also for general AI adoption in Europe. And that's why also, I mean, we built this AI companies Compass, which has now 100 companies, 250 events a year, several thousand members. So it's also really like connecting people with each other. Like I truly believe in like having these different stakeholders, like big corporations, startups, investors, policymakers, researchers, like all meet each other and collaborate. Like that creates a lot of great things, and that's why we created the campus. So it's really not like we are really not the center. We are just the orchestrator, but I'm sure there's a lot of business and like learnings happening every day on the campus. Like I see people talking at the coffee machine, like sitting together. I see people from
Yeah.
different companies exchanging notes, people hosting events together. So friendships emerging. So I think that connectivity makes me really happy, because I think that will lead to a lot of great things, and many things I probably never find out, but that's totally fine, right? Like, I think then it still has a good impact. So I think we're trying to keep the campus as open as possible. Like, whenever people are in town, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, like if people are in town for a week, they can work from the campus. They can spend some time here, see that really. It's like your apartment. Like when you have friends in town, you also let them stay at your apartment. I mean, you probably don't let them stay at your apartment for like 3 months, because that's a bit too intrusive. But if a friend comes over, you always have them over for like a week. That's totally fine. I think we want to have kind of the same like attitude with the AI campus. It's like an open house for anyone who's in town, and that ultimately creates like new relationships, new business. And I think especially in AI, that's super important, because I feel like there's a lot, I mean, also in the current discussions around like AI regulation, there's all these policy people making talks. There's big tech having like, the regulatory capture, closed source agenda. There's like the research community having their views. There's the startups. There's a different perspective on different continents. So it's like all these different stakeholders, and they all kind of try to bring their message. But I think we need more talk between these stakeholders. And for that, I think the campus is great, because people are co-located and have to talk to each other, and even if it's just at the coffee machine.
Yeah. Nice. If we were to go on then and ask about building businesses to exit, again, is it a strategy most people come in with? I don't think so. I think a lot of people come in and love the challenge that they're working on, and that becomes their passion. And then, after some time, you get an offer, start getting calls, you start getting VCs knocking on your door, and they start asking, can they acquire you? But doesn't happen a lot. It's the honest truth. It's a hard thing to get yourself in the position to build a business that is even in a position to exit. But you've done it. You've done it with scale through the campus, which to me I think is exceptional, right? Creating generational wealth, most likely for all the people involved in an absolutely unbelievable move. But like, what was that experience like? Like, does that set? How did that have like a knock on effect even throughout the other founders? Right, it must be pretty exciting to see stuff like that happening.
Yeah, I mean, they got acquired by Scale. Causa got acquired by SAP. So I think from a fund perspective, I mean, we want to build companies that become uni or hopefully decacorn. So I think ultimately in this fund, I think there will be a few companies that get there. But I think obviously some companies will completely fail, and then for some, I think there's just on the way like a point where it just makes much more sense to join forces with a bigger company.
Yeah.
Because they can grow quicker, or they really need the tech, or they like the team, and so there's different reasons. And so I think you always need to look at the lookout, and sometimes that's the better path, both for the founders as well as for the companies. Yeah, and I think that's not something we wake up for in the morning. I think like you want to go, like, and also bring founders on board that can go crazy big. But sometimes, I mean, you learn new things on the way, and then the better way is to actually have the company acquired. And obviously, that's much better than having the company, just staying around, being like kind of flat or dying. So I think it's a great outcome. I mean, both for the founders, investors, and also for the acquiring company. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as well, I would also guess it gives you an opportunity to reinvest a lot of that money back into the campus, back into future founders, into events, and into I'm going to call it like the campus ecosystem, right? Because you have a fantastic one there.
Yeah. No, I think it's super important. It also builds new relationships to these big companies that acquire things, and allows to collaboration. And also, I think as these companies get acquired, the team learns new things from the acquiring company, and that gets fed back into the ecosystem. So I think it's a normal venture cycle, and I think it's great. And I think it's also something that has been more of an issue in Europe. I think in Europe, I mean, ultimately, I mean, we need more money in venture capital, but venture capital money only gets invested if money also flows back at some point. And both the IPO market, but also the M&A market is much less active here in Europe. I think big companies are much less active in acquiring like tech companies also at high valuations because I don't know, they see less of the value, they don't know how to integrate it, they're less like risk taking, and so I think that's a big problem. So I think encouraging also some of the big companies here to be like, look, yeah, it's if you buy a big company, like that will have a huge impact for the ecosystem, and it also will have a positive ROI for you. I think that's great, and we need more of that in Europe for sure.
Nice. And then yeah, I mean, look, if we're on to building companies still, but I want to talk about the teams, the formations of ideation. So you spoke a lot about people who have their USPs, whether they're domain expertise, whether they're super passionate. That's what you look for. What's still the challenges? So you assemble the right team, you get the right people. They might have a customer, or like, well, let's pretend if they do or they don't. But whether or not, I want to know, when you have a team together that really looks like they could knock it out of the park, where do they struggle?
I mean, like I think often they hit roadblocks on the way. Things take longer, sales cycles are longer, tech becomes harder. Some customers, some investor drops out. So I think it's being also competition comes up. So I think it's being adaptive, like on the way, and kind of not giving up. Like if you were a consultant, you could probably at many points make a slide and be like pros of cons of giving up, and there would be more pros to give up than not to give up. And I think you want again the founders that are irrationally and still push through, even though everything speaks against them. And so I think that's super important. And so yeah, there are lots of struggles on the way. I think for every of our company, I could name you like 5 things that are going really well and 5 things are not going well, and it's also different things for different companies. So some, getting the tech right becomes harder, some need to grow faster on the revenue side, some struggle to hire some key positions, some are in the fundraisings, but then other things are equally great and going well. And that's the thing, it comes back to the founders. Like, we as investors, we can't solve all these problems, we are not the domain experts, we will never solve it. It's with the founders, and we need to trust them and to be successful. And I think what has been helpful is, and what we've seen also works well best with some of the founders, is if they're very coachable. Because like ultimately it's not about who knows the answer, it's about that it's done right. And so even if the founders like don't know the right answer, like them reaching out to us, but then also to many other people, obviously, to being like, hey, can you help me? Do you know somebody who can help me? Like, I think that's usually a great sign that they're pragmatic and they just want to be the best outcome. Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's one type of like struggle or challenge. It's very different, and also changes for the company. Like sometimes one topic is a challenge, half a year later it's a completely different topic.
Yeah, it's quite the same. And I know we're generally always speaking about deep tech companies. I always am. I'm always quite surprised by how many people I've speak to on this podcast where it's not the technology, right? It's generally like commercials and sales cycles, getting buy-in, creating even a product-led market, a product-led growth strategy, instead of like just hoping for large sign-ups. It's pretty tough. I guess I'll follow it up and with the final question then, Rasmus, and it's probably going to be a tough one to answer, but what skills do you not see enough of on the market, in founding teams, in deep tech right now? Like wherever you want to see it, like what's the purple squirrel?
I think people not thinking big enough, like I think people sometimes, especially in Europe, like
I was going
feel
to ask, is that a German
almost.
limitation?
I think it's a European one. It's like
Yeah.
I think it's less in the US, but I think like this, like people nearly feeling embarrassed if they have a crazy huge idea and be like, hey, this can be $1 trillion company. Like
Yeah.
like somebody saying that to my face like that, and then also obviously making a case for why this can be so big. Like, few people dare to say that. So I think it's something that is super important because it creates a vision that both investors, customers, and also employees can relate to. So I think having this huge ambition and vision and believing in this, almost being a bit like crazy, I think is something I would love to see more of.
Yeah. Now I see that a lot. I see US companies, they're coming in, they're going ideation, and they're like, yeah, we want pre-seed of 20 million. Right? It's like, because we got this crazy idea, and it happens, and it's
Yeah, and it's
I
important
see.
because it comes back to the VC economics, right? Like, because your VC only fund works only if you create like 1-2 of these huge outcomes. And so for every founder you're meeting, you're asking you the question, not like, can they sell the company for 20 or 100 million, but like, is there a non-zero chance that this founder builds a $10 billion company? And because only then the VC economics work. So you actually want these crazy ideas, and then you rather bet on those than betting on 10 ideas that can only become 20 million outcomes, because your economics will not work then. So
Yeah.
For that, the venture capital is too expensive. So if you understand VC economics, you understand why people look for this. But sometimes I feel like founders, there's still a big disconnect between then what people pitch.
Nice. Love the insights on that, Rasmus. And look, that takes us up for time. So for everyone listening, this is the Leadership Labs podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Kelly. Today's guest was Rasmus Rothe, who is a founder of Merantix. Rasmus, it's been a pleasure.
Anthony, great. And let's do it again in 6 years at the latest, hopefully earlier.
Maybe.
Thanks for the
Maybe
great questions.
We'll have a Leadership Labs conference, which I'd love.
Sounds great. No, thanks so much.
That concludes another enlightening episode of the Leadership Labs podcast. If you found today's episode thought-provoking and informative, be sure to subscribe to the Leadership Labs on your preferred podcast platform or on YouTube. Thank you once again for joining us on this journey through the Leadership Labs. Until next time.